Shalom.
Welcome to Hebrew as we study the Torah portion through the lens of relationships. So just as a refresher or a recap, when we are looking at the scriptures, we are looking at it from the relationship aspect. So that is a relationship with God, relationship with our fellow humans. Any person that we run into is going to be those relationships. And we definitely dig deep into the marriage aspect of those relationships and also those dating relationships as well. So let's dig in.
The portion we're looking at this week is called Parsha Balak. Balak being the king of Moab and one of the few people that are distinguished to have a Torah portion named after them. Balak means destroyer or devastator. So not really a great connotation with his name unless you look at the way he would have been revered in the ancient Near East, and then it kind of transforms that a little bit. The portion we're looking at is Bamidbar, or Numbers, chapters 22, verse 2 through chapter 25, verse 9. So it kind of has a strange way that it's derived out in the English translations of the scripture. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to dig into this. Most of the things that we're going to talk about today are just going to be taken from chapter 22. There's a lot, and I mean a lot of stuff that we could talk about in here. But the things we're going to really focus in on occur in chapter 22. So the first one, we're going to read chapter 22, verses 2 through 4.
Now Balak the son of Zippor saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. So Moab was in great fear because of the people, for they were numerous, and Moab was in dread of the sons of Israel. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this horde will lick up all that is around us as the ox licks up the grass of the field. And Balak the son of Zippor was king of Moab at that time.
So what we can see just from this little setup of the Torah portion is that Balak saw what Israel did to the Amorites, and he drew the conclusion that Israel would do the same to him and the Moabites. Balak apparently did not send messengers to Israel to ask their intentions. If he had, then Israel, or Moses, would have likely answered him according to Deuteronomy 2, verse 9. If we look at that, I'll paraphrase and say that Yah said to Moses, do not distress Moab, do not battle them, I'm not going to give any of their land to you. So Balak was operating under an assumption. If he had actually sent a messenger to Moses to ask what Israel was going to do, then Moses would have likely answered him according to what he had already received from Yah. But Balak assumed the worst. He set a course based on his assumptions instead of just going to the source and establishing what Israel's intent was concerning them, not concerning everybody else around them, but just what did Israel intend to do to Moab. So what can we look at this and just try to figure out some things that we can learn about establishing relationships, maintaining relationships, and things of that nature. One thing that we would want to look about is making assumptions.
Don't assume. You want to go to the source. When Mark and myself were, even before we dated, on our first date, we were friends a little bit. And so on that date, Mark asked point blank, he's like, Sarah, can you tell me a little bit about your divorce? He's like, I know this could be a little hard, but he's like, I've heard some things, or you've said here or there bits and pieces of it, but I don't understand. Like, can you give me a little bit more of an understanding? And it was like, yeah, not a problem. Like, I'll tell you my side of the story, And instead of Mark assuming, what took place, he wanted to go ahead and go to the source. He wanted to go to me and be like, hey, Sarah, what happened? Why did you get divorced? What took place within that? What's the story around some of that? Why did you come to this conclusion of it? So going to the source, if you can, is the most important thing. Go to the actual mouth of the person who said such and such, if you're able to. Now, sometimes you might not be able to get two sides of the story, but it's good to go ahead and go to the side and be like, hey, what took place here? Can you explain a little bit more? Like, let's assume the good in people versus the bad in people and figure out what the truth is going to be.
Yeah, and whenever possible, you want to go to the source, as Sarah said. Now, could I have likely gotten some good information if I had gone to, let's say, one of Sarah's friends and asked Sarah's friend, what did Sarah say about her divorce? So her friend would have told me as best as she could recall, if her friend had good intentions, would tell me as best she can recall what Sarah told to her.
Yeah.
But that is not the same as going to the source and getting it firsthand. When we are dealing with second and third hand testimonies, that is inviting, it often leads to skewed or incorrect conclusions.
Yeah.
And it's not because the person that you're receiving the second or third hand testimony has any malice. It's just because the way they remember it,
Yeah.
and they weren't actually there.
Yeah.
So what we're basically just trying to say is, in your relationships, when you are trying to establish a relationship, when something happens in your relationship, that's going to be with anybody, with your spouse, with your friend, with your employee, with your employer, with your community. It is always best to go ahead and go to the source whenever it's possible, so that you can draw the best possible conclusions from firsthand evidence.
Yeah. Get the truth,
So the next thing that we will talk about very briefly, because this is not the next issue that we really wanted to get to, but we are going to pause and look at this for a moment. And that's going to be 22 verse 18. And it's also repeated later on in 24:13. Bilam answered and said to the servants of Balak, though Balak were to give me his house filled with silver and gold, I am unable to go beyond the word of Yah, my Elohim, to do less or more. And when we go over to 24:13, he basically says the same thing. If Balak should give me his house filled with silver and gold, I am unable to go beyond the word of Yah, to do either good or evil of my own heart. What Yah speaks, that I speak. So basically the idea that we're getting from that is the idea of boundaries, which we have talked about extensively in our previous videos. So we won't really go back into that at this point. But we do need to understand that in all relationships, boundaries are set up for protection and for blessing. So if Yah sets up a boundary for us, which we would call a command, an instruction, a judgment, one of these words that we are talking about, something that has come from his mouth, his voice, he has set that up either to bless us or to keep us safe. And in much the same way, when we set up boundaries inside of relationships, it is to do the same thing. It's either to keep us safe or to keep our loved ones safe, or it is to make sure that we are getting the desired outcome from it, the blessing, and that we're not headed in the wrong direction. That's what the boundaries are there for. Other than that, we're going to get into like the main star of this chapter, which is this whole thing with the talking donkey.
It's a talking donkey. Like, come on. Like, that is absolutely so bizarre, but so awesome too that God can go ahead and use a talking donkey. Like,
there's so many metaphors and things that you can take from this. But this account happens in chapter 22. It's verses 22 through 35 is mainly where we're going to get, this account from. And we're not going to read through that. We will make the assumption that you have read this already. If not, then you can go back and read it.
Go back and read it. Just go.
It's an interesting account. But one thing that we're going to talk about this in the first is the things that the donkey did. We see that the donkey 3 times, did something to try and avoid this messenger, or sometimes it is translated as angel of Yah, that was standing as an adversary against Balaam. So one time we have the donkey turning aside because it had space to do that. It could either go right or left. And then the second time we see it in a narrower spot
Yeah.
where all the donkey could do was try and squeeze around the messenger, but ended up pressing Balaam into a wall, press his foot into a wall.
He got scratched.
Yeah, and then the third time there was no space. So the donkey, rather than just getting Balaam killed and herself, just laid down under him and just would not proceed. So that, to us, and what we see in that, is that the donkey was able to perceive some red flags.
Yeah. So what are some red flags that you see in a relationship? Like in the beginning of a relationship, you might have your list. We talk about creating a list of what it is you're looking for in a spouse. So when you find somebody that you might be interested in, you're able to go off of that list and be like, God, is this somebody that meets the things that I need? Not that I want, okay, but something that I truly need in my life. You know, somebody, if you have kids, somebody who's going to be a good father or a good mother, you know, somebody who's going to go ahead and provide, somebody who has a car, somebody who has a job, somebody who loves God, you know, and what does that mean? Do they keep Shabbat? Do they not? How do they keep the feasts? You know, those are some basic things to be able to have on your list. So when you meet somebody, do they have those things? Or are there some red flags? You know, you have that wider path to be able to go down. Are those certain red flags popping up and you're just ignoring them? And then as you go down that narrow path, you know, you have your narrow path, you have your boundaries on either side, but you're in this love bubble. Now you've fallen more in love with them. Now you like them even more. And now you're really ignoring some of those red flags or some of those yellow flags because you're in that love bubble and you're like, oh, I'll just compromise on this. Oh, I don't need somebody who has this anymore. That's not really important to me. Well, then all of a sudden, you go down even more further of a path and the donkey just lays down on you. Huge red flag, but you're in that love bubble and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't care. I'm in love with them. I want to get married to them. And we're just going to work it out once we get married. Well, that might not be the best route to go. You might end up having your first fight on your honeymoon. You might end up having your first fight or disagreement or argument or whatever within your first month, 2 months, 6 months of marriage. And you're like, what have I done? Yeah. Now what do I do? I wish I would have known this before. You need to listen to your friends. You need to listen to your counsel. You need to have people in your corner that are able to go ahead and sit down and talk to you about those things while you're in that love bubble. They're not wanting to burst it. They're just wanting to have you see through a different light possibly what's going on. Learn to listen. You know, there might not be a donkey in your life that is able to go ahead and tell you. You know, it might not be your chicken telling you to go ahead and stop whatever you're doing.
Yeah, it's if you want to look at something fascinating, go and look up the occurrences of donkeys in the scripture, and B, go and just look at some secular sources that will tell you the characteristics of donkeys. And what kind of animals, what kind of creatures, and the tendencies that they are. That's something interesting. If you get the backstory of, you can understand a little bit more of the metaphor that we may lay on you here. But just looking at what Sarah was talking about, we can take these 3 red flags that the donkey saw. Balaam was not paying attention, and we can look at it as stages of relationship. You know, the beginning stage. In the beginning stage of starting to get to know somebody, and starting to ask questions and things, you've got a lot of space on the left or the right to turn to the left or the right. You're not emotionally connected or emotionally involved yet. So if you can start to really look at all the things that are there and ask, you know, lots of questions, the right questions, and just have lots of good conversations, you can see some of these red flags before you get emotionally caught up. As Sarah said, the love bubble. You know, after the beginning stage, well, now you would move to this intermediate stage, which now the space to actually turn to the right or the left, it's gotten limited. Because now you have an emotional investment.
Now you're involved. Now you are like, okay, this could be the one. And you ignore those things.
You'll ignore them, or it'll at least be easier to overlook some of these things because love has bloomed.
Yeah.
You know, the love bubble is going, and you will look at a thing like, yeah, that's maybe not exactly how I believe on something, but it's minor.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a problem later on down the road.
Yeah.
And it kind of is because the emotional involvement has started to develop.
Yeah.
But then you get to the advanced stage, where the donkey just had to lay down.
Yeah.
Well, now the space to turn to the left or the right is extremely limited because love has now blinded your ability to perceive, but to even perceive, or to question or deal with the red flags that are showing up.
Yeah.
And it's because, as Sarah said, like, you're on a course, like, I'm in love, it's gonna happen, this is what I want, I'm not paying attention to this other stuff, not even seeing some of the other stuff.
Yeah.
So that is why you need your donkeys. And again, look into donkeys. It's fascinating. Donkeys are very protective.
Yes.
Donkeys, once they see you as family, they will not let anything happen to you.
Yeah.
They will attack like savage beasts, as it were, to keep you safe, just in the natural world. So you need your donkeys to help you see what you are emotionally challenged to perceive and deal with. And I know that's maybe an interesting term you never heard. You've heard challenged on a lot of levels, but you get to the point where you're emotionally challenged. You have a disability because of your emotional connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one thing to kind of look at. Another one is just to look at the symbolism of what's going on here. What does Balaam symbolize? What does the donkey symbolize? The donkey can see what you can't see.
Yeah.
Because the donkey is objective.
Yeah.
The donkey doesn't have the feelings and the emotions diluting them.
Yeah.
Okay? Balaam was only able to see his desired outcome. Balaam wanted the wealth. Balaam wanted the honor. Balaam wanted the status. He had something that he wanted.
Yeah.
And because of the things that he wanted, he was deluded from being able to perceive and see these red flags.
Yeah.
So where can you fit into this story? Yeah. As far as the donkey goes, are you able to be somebody's donkey?
Yeah. Are you that friend who's able to go ahead and stick up and be like, hey, I see some of these red flags. You need to ask more questions about this, or I saw this conversation happen, or you need to dig a little bit deeper within this. What is it that you are able to go ahead and do and help and protect your friend?
Who's your donkey?
Yeah.
I mean, can you say to somebody, truly, you're my donkey? And I mean, I know that sounds funny, but you are my trusted counselor. Yeah. You're here to protect me. You're here to help me see the things that I can't see.
Yeah.
Who's your donkey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
then Balaam, where are you acting like Balaam? Where are you being deluded because of a desire, a feeling, an emotion, a desire to get married, a desire to have children, a desire to be on a homestead? What is it? You have this desired outcome, and where are you overlooking things that you don't need to overlook just to get that desired outcome? Because Balaam was overlooking some stuff because he knew what he was supposed to do. He had these conversations with Elohim, and that's digging a little bit deeper as to why Elohim actually came out as an adversary against him. If we get a little bit further into verse 32, the angel said that your way is reckless or even perverse before me. So, I mean, that's, something else, that we don't have really the time to go into right now. Yeah. But you don't want to basically be deluded, by your emotions, your emotional connection, attachment, love. Love is a great thing.
It is fabulous, you guys. It really, really is, when it really is meant to be. We're not trying to dismiss the love or dismiss the relationships or the marriage of that goal. You know, we want to help you to be able to have the right one. The right one is going to fit the things that you need, and even some of the things that you want. You know, God's not just going to give you everything that you need or want. He's going to go ahead and give you his best. It's a matter of you waiting for his best, you know, and willing to go ahead and give that area of your life to him and be like, God, this is yours. This is yours completely. Help me to go ahead and be patient and wait. And we know the waiting is hard. We both waited, you guys. We're both in our mid-40s, got married 3 years ago, and in 2020, we both waited. You know, we both went through struggles, so we get it completely. You know, we understand that. But we also understand, though, the red flags that can lead to other heartache, too. And we want to help you to not have that heartache. You know, we do. We have friends who've gone through heartache, and we don't want that to happen to you either.
So I guess, you know, there's a lot of things that we could continue to talk about here, but we really just, you know, wanted to stress to you, you know, you need to ask the right questions. You need to ask the right questions of the right people, you know, getting the firsthand accounts whenever possible so that you can establish things instead of just assuming.
Yeah.
You need to do that, and you need to have your counselors. You need to have your donkeys. You need to be able to have people who can put a check on you, as it were. Like, yeah. I'm checking that. I'm going to make you examine this a little bit more closely, because it seems to me that you are not paying attention to something that is going to be a significant matter in a later stage in your relationship. Yeah. So you definitely need to ask the right questions of the right people and have donkeys.
Yes.
For all you homesteaders out there, you need donkeys.
Yes, get donkeys. Awesome. Well, thanks you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe, okay, so you can get notified of our videos when they come out. And we hope you guys have a great day. Bye.
Shalom.